welcome to another edition of the TARDIS podcast. In today's episode, as always, I am joined by a very special guest, one that I'm particularly excited about today. I'm joined by the one and only Sophie Aldred, or Sophie Henderson. How do you prefer to
be called? Hi, everybody. Well, yes, I guess it's funny, isn't it, having two names?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. I was my professional name is still Sophie Aldred, and then for my well, I shouldn't really tell you about my bank details, should I?
Yeah, no, probably not.
Things like that. It's yes, it's Sophie Henderson, because that's of course my married name, and it's funny because Henderson is actually a much easier name to spell on the phone and things than Aldred. You know, so I do tend to call myself Henderson at home, but for sort of normal life. But then professionally, I'm still Sophie Aldred.
That makes sense. I probably should have asked you about that first. I think
no, not at all. I think people, you know, especially for women these days, it's funny. You do make a choice when you get married, and some husbands take on their wives' names now. You know.
Yeah, anyway, exactly. Yeah, great. I mean that was a nice opening tangent there. Didn't expect to talk about married names, but I mean, we cover all bases here. We cover all bases.
Sorry if there's a noise in the background. That's my son making his morning NutriBullet.
That's no problem at all. I literally just had to exile my family from the kitchen because I'm right next to the kitchen. So yeah, don't worry. I can totally relate to that. So the first thing I wanted to ask you was about, well, how you got into acting in the first place, because I feel like maybe not everyone might know, and if we've got any aspiring actors in the audience, they might want to know how you got into it yourself.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'd always wanted to do it, and I don't know where it came from, because none of my family were interested in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, right from when I was very small, I used to put on plays and actually write them, direct them, star in them, boss everybody else around. And then I went on to school and did a lot of school plays, and then I went to university and I did a drama degree, which was very unusual in those days. There were only 5 universities that offered a drama degree.
Oh wow.
I went to Manchester and did that, and then my father, much to my father's despair, it still hadn't knocked it out of me. I think he was rather hoping I was not going to want to be an actress.
Yeah.
But then I always had a sort of, I don't know, right, like a, not so much a business brain, but about a sort of what do I do now to get that? And I knew that I had to get an equity card. So what I ended up doing was singing with a friend round working men's clubs around Manchester.
All right.
And we both got our equity card, because in those days you couldn't work without one. It was one of those weird catch-22 things where you couldn't work without an equity card, but you couldn't get work unless you had one.
Yeah.
So how did you do it, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, we did eventually manage to get enough work in the working men's clubs to get our equity cards. And then I came back down to London, where I'm from, and I applied for jobs, any jobs in the back of the Stage newspaper.
Yeah.
And I got a job in a sort of equity blacklisted panto outfit that was sending out pantomimes to working men's clubs up around the northeast. Oh no, I did it the other way around. That's right. No, I did that first. That's how I knew about working men's clubs. So I did that for a while. Then I got my card, and then I came back down to London, and I, after doing lots of auditions, I got a job with a really lovely children's theatre company called the Theatre of Thelema, that they're now called Quicksilver Theatre Company, in Hackney. And we went round schools and did shows for schools, basically, and that's how I started.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's really nice. That's obviously a really nice introduction. It's nice, obviously, because, well, I think when you watch someone on the television, sometimes you get, I suppose, how you imagine someone coming to be on television and how it actually happened are often two very different things.
People think it's easy.
Yeah. No,
and
yeah, no.
it really ain't. You
Yeah.
know, it's like, I mean, I loved doing children's theatre, and I loved going. I did a lot of that, and I did a lot of. I worked for Polka Children's Theatre Company in Wimbledon, who were wonderful. I did a tour with them. I did a lot of community projects and stuff like that, and
Mm.
very little income, but a big reward, and lovely working for lovely people. But it's a you know, it's not like you suddenly get to be on TV.
No.
And I'm really glad that that's not the case, because I don't know, I got such a lot of good experience from doing that.
Yeah. No, definitely. So obviously, so you'd been acting for quite a while before Doctor Who came along. So I wanted to ask you, how were you approached for that in particular? Was there an
Oh
audition
well,
process? Was
that's another thing that I very rarely got approached for anything, and especially
Yeah.
when you're starting out. It was definitely my agent. By the time I'd got an agent, they were definitely the ones who were doing the approaching.
Yeah.
So, I was in the back row of the chorus in Fiddler on the Roof up in Manchester at the Opera
Hmm.
House. I'd got into doing musical. I always did lots of musical stuff because I sing. Um, and my agent put me up for Doctor Who, just for 3 episodes actually.
Yeah.
It was a play. They were cross casting a character from Delta and the Bannermen, which was one of Sylvester's first stories,
Yeah.
and Ace in Dragonfire,
Yeah.
and they were looking for, young women. And
Mm.
I went down to London. I did the audition. I got a recall. Never ever thought in a million years that I would get the part.
Yeah.
And it was unbelievable that I got the part, really, from that. But I think they saw something in me that was not. They saw straight away that I'd be good for Ace rather than for Ray.
Yeah.
Um, and they were looking for somebody at the time who potentially could take over from Bonnie,
Yeah.
because she was thinking of leaving. And
Yeah.
then by the time we started, we did the first week of rehearsals, and then after the first studio day, John Nathan Turner came down. He was the producer at the time.
Yeah.
He came down and said, from the gallery, and said to me, "Well, we're on if you're on." And
Oh wow.
I took that to mean, right? Yes, and I was just thrilled.
Yeah, no, completely. I was going to ask you about that actually. I was going to ask whether you knew whether it would carry on into future stories or whether it would stop, like whether you thought it would just stop with Dragonfire initially. So I think.
Well, initially, yeah. My agent had said when they offered me the part, they said there was the potential to go on and be the companion.
Yeah.
And I was bowled over by that,
Yeah.
But I never thought really that it would actually happen. And then I kept very quiet about it, And
Yeah.
funnily enough, Tony Selby, who is the wonderful actor playing Glitz, who is the sort of wide boy in Dragonfire.
Yeah.
The original story was that Ace went off with Glitz at the end.
Yeah.
And he kept saying in rehearsals, "Oh, Ace would make a brilliant companion. You'd be great. You'd be really good at this." And I kind of had a secret hope. And Sylvester knew, and nobody else really knew. Bonnie obviously knew that she was possibly leaving.
Mm.
So the final scene with Bonnie, the Doctor's goodbye to Mel, was actually written pretty much on a napkin in the tea bar outside.
Oh wow.
And when they just sort of decided in studio that it was going to be her who was going off with Glitz, and me staying.
Yeah. I can imagine that was very strange having it be all so last minute. I suppose I can imagine it almost not feeling real because it happened so quickly for you at least.
Yeah, none of it felt real. I was living in a housing association flat with some friends, which we'd actually we'd taken on a tenancy, and very low rent, very sort of in southeast London, and to be going from there to the BBC studios and filming Doctor Who, it was just like, it was
Yeah.
amazing. It was weird.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask you actually about Dragonfire, because obviously you got to perform alongside Bonnie Langford. Did you enjoy that? Obviously, because you're your two companions on screen pretty much. Was she a lot of fun to work alongside with? Because I really enjoyed your dynamic in Dragonfire.
Thank you. Yeah, she was brilliant. She still is. I'd known her from her massive career. As a child actor, she played the most brilliant roles in Bugsy Malone, and she was in the Just William stories, which were always I loved the books. I grew up with the Just William books, and she was the perfect Violet Elizabeth Fox.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately for Bonnie, people had kind of forgotten the fact that she's actually an actor, and had kind of thought that she actually really is like that, like Violet Elizabeth Fox. Yeah. No, she's not. And there's never been. And is a very, very talented actress and singer and dancer, and just all round great person.
Yeah.
And we got on straight away. And I loved, as you say, that I loved the dynamic between Ace and Mel, which was like Ace sort of taking this rather protective role of Mel.
Yeah.
And, being the kind of, she was the sort of the tomboy, and kind of, Mel was the one who screamed. I loved that dynamic, and we still remain friends to this day.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. Obviously, so once obviously Dragonfire concluded, season 25 began with the show, and I want to ask you, obviously season 25 was notable for seeing the return of both the Daleks and the Cybermen in both Remembrance of the Daleks and Silver Nemesis respectively. What was it?
Lucky.
Yeah, what was it like for you to come face to face with those like icons of British pop culture, and just how did that, like, how was that experience first seeing those creatures, those monsters, if you like?
It was incredible. I mean, I'd grown up like everybody, I think, at the time with Doctor Who. I'd been terrified, particularly of the Cybermen.
Yeah.
So for me, it was amazing to kind of get my own back on all those childhood nightmares. Save myself years of therapy. But the Daleks as well. That was my first story that we shot with me, the companion. How lucky was I?
Yeah.
To have, and a brilliant story as well by Ben Aronovich. A fantastic.
It is fantastic.
It's such a good story, and so relevant, for them and for now, even, the sort of anti-racism, the kind of, and funnily enough, I was watching the recent Dalek story with Jodie, and this reminds me of something.
I was thinking the exact same thing as I was watching it.
Security and all that.
And
I thought it was a story that worked particularly well. I was just absolutely thrilled to be working with them. In fact, there was a moment in the rehearsal rooms where we were all running about, and there was Simon Williams, who I'd known from Upstairs, Downstairs, and there was we were all running around, and there were the guys who were playing the insides of the Daleks. They were actually there in the rehearsal room, sticking their hands out, going exterminate like this, and I kind of stood back for a minute, and I thought, this is bizarre. This is the kind of game I used to play in the playground at school.
Yeah.
And now here I am. I'm a grown up, and I'm actually in it.
It sounds like an awful lot of fun, and obviously, Ace is notable for being the only companion to defeat a Dalek with a baseball bat, which I can imagine being a lot of fun in itself. I imagine.
That's going on my gravestone.
Yeah.
You beat up a Dalek with a baseball bat.
I can.
I've dined out on that story many a time.
Yeah, I bet that's always an impressive story to tell.
Exactly.
Tell at parties,
Yeah.
So obviously, I wanted to ask you as well about like your relationship to Sylvester, because obviously, again, your dynamic on screen is obviously fantastic. one of my personal favourite Doctor Companion dynamics, duos, however you want to say it. So I wanted to ask you, obviously, you seem, obviously from things I've seen afterwards, you still seem like friendly now. Is that still the case? Are you very close?
We are, and it's just been one of the great joys of my life to have Sylvester McCoy in my life.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I mean, from the moment we met, really, we knew we were going to get on. And he says it's because I'm the only person who laughs at his jokes. Um, but he's just the most wonderful, eccentric, curious, brilliant human being. You know, he's
Mm.
taught me such a lot about outlook on life and the world, and his generosity and his kind of you know, what you get is what you get with Sylvester. You
Yeah.
know, if he's happy, he's happy. If he's grumpy, he's grumpy. If he's, you know, it's just he's just and he's so fascinated by the world and how it
Yeah.
works and the people in it and politics, and he's so bright. And you know, yeah, I mean, he's just uh, a great person to be with. Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely comes across, and obviously, the one occasion I did meet him, he still seems like such a showman even to this day.
Oh,
Um,
completely, yeah.
yeah. So it's almost obviously we say it about every Doctor, but it especially came across to me how he was very much his Doctor was very much a exaggeration of himself,
Yes,
in a lot of ways.
yes,
And I think that's when the Doctors are at their best, when they reflect the person performing them.
yeah,
And I guess you could say that for any character on television. I think in some way, if the person playing the character has some sort of relation to the character themselves, then I think it leads to better performances because you know almost what that character is experiencing and is meant to feel in these given like situations and experiences because it's based on your own personal experience.
yeah. I really agree with that.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I think as well, obviously, as I said, it comes across really well in the show itself. I honestly like. I think it's just a crime that you guys didn't get more on-screen material. I think, it's obviously the show very unfortunately got cancelled in 1989. Obviously it got obviously there was kind of things before that with Michael Gray before then. Was there any sort of obviously this is a bit more of a sort of sadder topic, but was there any warning about that for you guys, or was it just sort of did it just sort of
No,
happen?
there wasn't, and I'm I'm really glad that there wasn't, because we kept on having a great time. And
Yeah,
I think if we'd known, there was nothing we could do about it. So actually, what John Nathan Turner did was absolutely perfect, which
yeah,
was keep it from the cast and crew. And you know, he was obviously working very, very hard behind the scenes. But I think the nail was in the coffin, possibly way before, you know, when
yeah.
the show had been on hiatus. And
Mm,
it was only John Nathan Turner's, you know, determination to keep it going that really had it work for those seasons that we
yeah.
did. And I'm so grateful to him forever for that.
Oh
But
no, completely.
but then, you know, with hindsight, you sort of think, well, I mean, it would have been lovely to have another season or half a season, as I was booked for.
Mm,
Um, but it would have been it actually would have been interesting to see whether, if it had gone on, you know, would it have then just sort of fizzled out, you
yeah,
know, that maybe it did need a break.
yeah,
Hopefully not as long as the one we had, but you know,
yeah. No, completely.
um, yeah, it's funny to look with hindsight, isn't it?
Yeah, no, yeah, completely. I think the way it was ended in the last part of Survival was particularly fitting, with the Doctor and Ace just carrying on harrowing adventures,
Yeah,
and obviously, in a way, you have the honor of being one of the longest running companions because your adventures didn't stop. They
yeah,
they carried on going, obviously, with the spin off media, obviously the books and the audio plays and all of that sort of thing. So
yeah,
I think, yeah, that's something that's really good about Big Finish. and what they do is that they give more of what we wish we could have seen, continue, even when because it does end so quickly, doesn't it? Like any era of the show, like it tends to only last, like Doctors only tend to stay for 3 years. Companions, it's normally even less time than that, for the most part. So I think having those adventures to have additional time with these characters is just such a brilliant idea, and I think it really elevates the brand for being more than just a show in a way.
Absolutely, I think everything that the fans have, because of course all the stuff around Doctor Who has all been initiated by the wonderful fans, and
Yeah,
Finish is no exception. And yeah, and that all came from it came from a company called BBV initially, which
yeah,
who, Bill Baggs, who was who was doing videos, and then people like Keith Barnfather with Real Time Pictures with his Myth Makers series, and then venturing into drama, and then
yeah,
of course Big Finish getting the license to do the audios, and it's great, isn't it? Because in those early days, nobody really knew that the market for audio would be as big as it is. And now,
yeah.
of course, it's wonderfully huge. And especially in the times that we're living in now, that I think that it's the perfect opportunity for people who maybe haven't explored Big Finish
Oh,
to
absolutely.
have been, sort of, it audio kind of takes you to places that other places can't reach in a way as well,
Yeah.
because it's all in the imagination of the listener. So there's definitely a huge place for Big Finish in the Doctor Who canon.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think that's it. I think the people, I don't know. There are some people for some reason who don't like to consider it, which I think is ridiculous, because you rob yourself in a way of some of the best material in like the franchise's history, in my opinion. Like those writers are fantastic as well. So I think we should all just like accept it all. You know.
Yes, yes, the more the merrier.
I
Let's
think
face
so, absolutely. Actually, while we were talking about audio, I was just before we were recording this, I wanted to listen to some of your more recent parts of the show and sort of things you've done involved with the show sort of recently, and I was listening to the first sort of 45 minutes of the new book that was released, the
it.
H. Harris Blyth, the book that came out with obviously yourself and the 13th Doctor.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you, what was it like to go from acting in the show to writing for the show? Did you find that transition easy? Was it quite difficult to go from one to the other? What was that like?
Oh well, yes. That it was amazing to be asked to do that.
Mm,
Obviously, I had done a book before with Mike Tucker, which was much more. It wasn't a novel. It was a kind of scrapbook and
yeah.
photographs book, which was the Ace book that came out about 5 years after we finished doing the show.
Hmm.
But I mean, I was absolutely thrilled to be there. There's nothing else I could have written about. I don't think, because I
Yeah.
think if you know a character, know the show so well,
Mm.
it's much easier to write about it. And of course, I couldn't possibly have written it without the help and support of Steve Cole and Mike Tucker, who were. It was very much a collaborative process. So I definitely wasn't working on my own. I don't know how people do that. Actually, I take my hats off to them. But
Yeah.
it was
I agree with you. I don't know how people write things on their own.
no. And I think the thing is with the book, with At Childhood's End, it was very much right. Okay, well, we've got these elements. Yeah.
Mm.
How are we going to get them together? I'd also just filmed the trailer for the season
Yeah,
26.
I was going to ask about that as well.
Yeah.
You beat me to it.
So I just filmed that, and that was so very much in my mind, and I'd absolutely loved the idea of that.
Mm.
And so I was able to tell Steve and Mike about that, and that sparked the whole kind of strand of that story of who Ace is now, you know, what kind of person has she become, and what is her relationship with the Doctor, and what happened between the Doctor and Ace, you know, that they parted, and you know, and for me, I know the very important scene was where Ace meets the 13th Doctor. That was the one that I really, that took a bit of, you know, writing and rewriting, and we all had a go at that, and even my husband had a bit of an input into that, because
oh wow,
you know, he's obviously lived with Ace for a long time as well now, so you know, we were all like, and it was very much like, I mean, as well as for a new market of people who obviously know and love the 13th Doctor, but we were very much thinking of the fans, and what do the fans who were fans of the 7th Doctor and Ace, what do they want to see in a novel, you know, making references to the stories, going back to Perivale.
I noticed that almost immediately as well with that story. There was a lot of references to things, obviously units mentioned very early on, even the Brigadier in Survival gets a name reference as well. Obviously Fenric gets name dropped early on as well, so I think it's very obvious that A Charitable Earth is a labour of love on the part of everyone involved, and I think that certainly comes across in the final product. At least what I've listened to it so far. I have to listen to the rest, and I will be doing that over the coming days. Obviously, now that I've conducted this interview, now I've got a bit of extra foreknowledge, which is nice to go into it with some fresh perspective. So obviously as well, we've had, obviously with State the World's in, Doctor Who never stops. So we had the Doctor Who lockdown, like the tweet-alongs and events and things like that. And obviously you made one of the appearances in those in the form of the Farewell Sarah Jane video, and obviously that hit me hard, because I'd sort of grown up watching the Sarah Jane adventures as well. So obviously watching that, and obviously having watched like a lot of the companions in that was a very sort of touching tribute, I found.
Oh yeah, I was just so it was great, because Russell T Davies and I met each other for the first time in the summer of 2019.
Oh wow!
We were both in Edinburgh at the same time. He was up there for the TV festival, and I was there because we always go there for the festival. I noticed that he was doing a talk, which I went to, and then we met up afterwards, and it was really fantastic to have a good old meet and a catch up with him. And so anyway, then we have been sort of texting each other on and off. And during lockdown, he suddenly got in touch with me and said, I don't suppose you would do this, would you? And I said, I absolutely. He said, would you mind doing a line for me? And I said, only a line? How dare you? So yeah, that's how that came about, and we got to work together at last. So although very odd working together, because of course I recorded it on the phone in my bedroom.
Yeah, exactly.
But there you go. So it was just really, like a lot of these things in lockdown have been. It was a privilege to be able to complete something, you know.
Yeah, and absolutely.
To be a part of something. Well, bigger in a way, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it just, like, that whole thing, I think just shows the dedication that people have. Like, that whole Doctor Who lockdown thing shows the dedication and, like, just the love within the community as well. And, like, you know, we were just doing, like, people were just doing it for, you know, for like, nothing for their own benefit. They were just doing it because it was to keep people entertained in these pretty challenging times. I think we can all agree on that, and I think it had a positive impact on a lot of people. Those lockdown things, and obviously, as I said, I think that that added a nice, like, that was just such a nice footnote to that. Like, not only obviously the Sarah Jane adventure, but also like a lot of the characters in that their stories, because obviously Ace ends up with K9 in the end, if I remember that correctly. In the end of Farewell Sarah Jane. So that's, I think there was only one companion who could have really looked after K9 after that. So I'm glad it went to you. So certainly
No.
I was glad of that. So I wanted to ask you as well. Obviously, a lot. I think fans. I know a lot of fans who really want Ace to come back, because we've recently had the return of John Barrowman in the recent Jodie Whittaker special that you mentioned earlier. I suppose I'm going to ask you that inevitable question that you probably always asked. Would you be willing to come back on television if the opportunity arose?
Oh, like a shot. Yeah.
Would you, if obviously, would you like to return with Jodie, or with a past Doctor or something like that? Would that be, or like an anniversary or something like that? How would you like to return?
Oh, anyone will do.
Anyone will do. Fair enough.
Happy, whatever anybody wants to write for me, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I just think really in a way for the fans, the fans
Yeah.
are so loyal to the program. That's the reason why it's still here. Everybody wants to know what happened to Ace. Everybody wants to see that,
Because she never really got a conclusion on screen. Obviously, there's been conclusions.
No, just walk
Finish and things,
into those bushes and at the end of Survival, as you said earlier.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's grounds the show, I think, really needs to explore in one form or another. I think certainly it's got a lot of narrative potential as well, because we never really had a companion who just didn't get a definitive ending, really. So I think having that, would be a really effective storyline, and I think it would be a storyline that a lot of fans would be happy to see. So I think certainly bring Ace back is what I'm trying to say, and I think you agree with that as well. Obviously, I wanted to talk about one of my personal favourite stories of yours, if I may. One of my favourite stories of yours is the Happiness Patrol. I'm a big fan of the Happiness Patrol. I wanted to ask you what that one was like, because it was a very bright and colourful story, but obviously it had such a dark undertone to it. And was that one a lot of fun to perform, because there was like people in very extravagant costumes, and obviously you had the Candyman and stuff like that. I can imagine that one also being like tremendously fun to perform, and just I can imagine that one being a lot of fun.
Oh, it was a wonderful story. I think it was so great. Well, given the time, the political agenda, really, nobody really kind of sussed that it was a kind of slight satire.
Yeah.
And Sheila Hancock just took to it straight away. Obviously, nobody even said anything. But I love the idea. The thing is, with the studio-bound stories, there was always a bit of like, this is meant to be a planet. And like Dragonfire, for example, I'm not getting the set direction at all, because how to create an ice planet, for goodness sake.
Yeah, it's hard.
But you know what I mean? The studio stories were always a difficulty.
Yeah.
But I think Happiness Patrol worked really well. And I love the fact that the lighting was slightly lower as well. It wasn't all sort of bright.
Yeah.
It's kind of the idea of the sort of slightly decadent peeling paint and things like that.
Yeah.
I love the characters as well. I love the touches like the blues harmonica and the whole theme of it. It was all beautifully done, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, again, it's got this. I think a lot of people look back on your time on the show and just realise how hugely relevant it is now still. Obviously, Happiness Patrol, I think, is relevant not only for its elements of satire of politics at the time, but also I think mental health in some aspects as well, because obviously there's that famous line in that story, happiness will prevail.
Yes.
And it kind of teaches you that story that it is okay to be sad.
Yes.
It's not
Yeah.
something that should be hidden or walked away from. It's totally fine emotion to have, and it's normal to have that exist alongside the happiness that you experience as well. And
Do you
I
know
think that's
what?
why I connected with it personally. But yeah,
I'm so glad you said that. That's such a good point, isn't it? Because we're kind of led to believe that we should all be happy all the time. And actually, I think sort of an underlying theme of being a human is this sort of slight melancholy or sadness or whatever. And you need to have the whole symphony, don't you? You can't just have the piccolos and the high notes. The
yeah,
the
exactly.
the beautiful music is a conglomeration of everything, and I agree, and I think it's really interesting to look at it in terms of, especially maybe nowadays with our mental health in question. You know, the sort of the way that we're there's beginning to be a sort of a change in the way that people are acknowledging mental health, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
and I think it can't come too quickly. We everybody at some stage in their life or all the time has had some issue with, I mean, depression or sadness or
Mm.
just low mood, or and it's something that in a way is not talked about enough. I
I
completely
complete.
agree.
Yeah, and I think that's why I felt like I connected to that one on a thematic and emotional level was for that reason. And
Yeah.
obviously it helps that, as I said, it was like really well performed, and it was like really well like shot and directed, and the
Mm.
sets were all wonderful in that one. The music as well, I thought, really added to that, because as you were saying about like um, the best is from a combination of all. I kind of liked the really beautiful music in that story was from the blues player,
Mm.
um, who was sad, because it showed that, sadness can lead to good things as well. Even if it's terrible in the moment, it can
Mm.
inspire you to make things that are wonderful in the future. And I think that, like, so much of art is driven by people's emotions at the time, and like people's own experiences, that if we tried to stop those negative experiences, I think in a way we'd be robbing ourselves of some of the best stories like ever, in my opinion.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I love what you said earlier about something about like um, just being honest about
Yeah,
like that sad feeling, because if you're trying to suppress that, then it kind of makes it worse, doesn't it?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
if you're allowing yourself and other people, I think it's because we also have a tendency to want to fix everything. So if we see
Yeah,
somebody who's
yeah,
sad, or if we see somebody who's not enjoying life or whatever, we tend to just really want them to be happy, and to fix it. But actually, until you kind of go, oh, do you know what? I just feel I'm having a bit of a shitty day today,
yeah,
or whatever.
exactly.
And then somehow, by kind of acknowledging that and being honest about it, it sort of automatically feels better somehow. It kind of opens
Completely.
up a bit of a space, doesn't it? And then to sort of share that with somebody else as well is yeah, and then you can go, oh, actually, yeah, the world is probably not such a bad place after all. So
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No. It's. I think it's very powerful on that level, and I think that it's that's why it remains one of my personal favorites of your tenure on the
mm,
show. I'm going to ask you some more sort of out there questions now. Obviously, everyone always asks the sort of the previous companions what they thought of their successors. Obviously, your successors were somewhat different, because they, first of all, were only in one film. And the reason I ask this question is because I distinctly remember one interview where you were lamenting the fact that they'd made it too romantic, I believe. So I
oh,
wanted to get
yeah,
your thoughts out on that here. If I
kissing,
may.
oh,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, you know, who wouldn't want to kiss Paul McGann? Let's face it.
Yeah. That's
um, yeah, but it's funny, isn't it? Because it did bring an element which was sort of shocking at the time. Now, I think with hindsight, because we've had the Doctor and Rose, and
yeah,
it's not quite such a
big thing anymore.
quite such a big thing. But at the time, it was like, how dare they? Which again shows how dyed in the wool we were, and how sort of like. But things, things evolve, things move on, things develop. And it was the beginning of a spark of an idea for something that worked so beautifully in the David Tennant Doctor and Rose story.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think because as well, didn't John Nathan Turner have a long-standing rule of no hanky-panky in the TARDIS? I think
Oh, yeah,
rule.
no hanky-panky in the TARDIS. Yeah.
So,
well, you see, of its time, it was really shocking, to like any time before then. I just think it would have kind of turned it into something it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was a family show, and in those days, family shows were family shows.
Yeah. Exactly.
It was a completely different era.
Yeah, because in your dynamic with the Doctor, there's very much, I think, as well, obviously there's obviously the teacher-student angle of it, with obviously Ace even calls the Doctor the Professor, so there is that sort of hierarchy in the dynamic there somewhat, but also I think there's somewhat of a father-daughter dynamic there slightly. I think that comes across because there's little moments where the Doctor will just try and reassure Ace and touch Ace's nose or your nose obviously, and I think that just comes across as very parental, and I quite liked that dynamic as well.
Yes, I think very early on we realised that was, well, Sylvester started doing that little nose touch thing, and it works so well. It's really, it sort of shows fondness and a sort of deep love and connection with each other, doesn't it? But
absolutely.
But nothing sort of sexual. There's no. But it's this sort of parental or avuncular or something. And it's funny, isn't it? Because you don't know about Ace's father really.
No.
But we could make up a whole sort of thing about Ace was looking for a father figure and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was probably my headcanon, if you like, is that the Doctor sort of filled that gap.
Yeah.
For Ace in a lot of ways. I think as well what works so well about their dynamic is how different their approaches are to things. Because obviously the Doctor is very, very methodical and he likes to work things out, scientifically, whereas Ace just, blow it up and get out of there sort of thing. And I think that sort of contrast in ideas is a lot of fun to explore as well. And obviously sometimes blowing things up is the right solution as well, which I think is kind of fun, because there's a scene, I think it's in Battlefield, where it says on the ground, blow this up here or something in some alien dialect, and that ends up being the entrance into this underground sort of spaceship type area that the alternate dimension knights were using. So I think it's nice that both the strengths and weaknesses of both of their ideas are played with, certainly. But I think it would have been so easy for just the Doctor to be right all of the time, because obviously there is an element obviously where the Doctor is right, but I feel as though it was important. I think that's why young people really connected to Ace as well, was because she was very, very fierce and could take down the monsters just as well, but did it in her own way. And I think that's why, especially young people do connect with Ace a lot.
Yeah, I think the great thing is that the Doctor sort of empowered Ace to be herself, which was this, and very, very authentic. So this sort of bolshy, fallible, upset, at times sad. She was a very well written, very well rounded character.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also very sweet, like the scenes where she's in the boarding house, even in Remembrance of the Daleks, with her hair down, and then
Yeah.
she's obviously like got a bit of a thing for Mike. Now she's being very girly there,
Yeah,
actually.
it's the most girly you probably see Ace as well,
Yeah,
because Ace
yeah,
in general is pretty tomboyish, as you said. So
yeah,
that is
yeah.
quite interesting.
Yeah, so there are those moments as well with Ace, and then being frightened in Greatest Show in the Galaxy of the
Yeah,
clowns, but the Doctor encourages her to kind of be authentic about every emotion that she has, and to sort of face her fears.
yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned Greatest Show in the Galaxy actually, because I have a slight confession to make. That's the one story of yours I haven't yet seen because I'm afraid of clowns. That's the one.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting. Oh,
Yeah,
you must watch it. Watch it in the daytime.
I'll watch it. Yeah, no.
Yeah, and then and don't worry.
Yeah, no.
It all works out in the end.
Yeah, exactly. I hope it does, because
Yeah,
obviously,
it's a wonderful story. Actually,
yeah,
Stephen did such a good job with that, and it's kind of the whole atmosphere of it is brilliant. It's and the cast, as usual, is excellent, and
yeah.
it really works as a story.
Yeah, no, it's quite funny actually, because where I got my fear of clowns from was the Sarah Jane Adventures, so I've just had a terrible experience with clowns, especially in that universe as well. Yeah,
Oh,
but I will try my best to conquer my own fear at some point or another.
oh,
But that no, but yeah, it's quite some humor because obviously.
yeah.
I like a while ago did like some watching on because I've got BritBox, which is where it's got like all the classic Doctor Who stories on it, and I was scrolling down through obviously season 25, and I came across Greatest Show in the Galaxy on there, and I just sort of went, I'll leave that one for now. I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you one day, and I'm sure I probably will.
Oh,
But I think that's what's great about Doctor Who as well is that it very much uses those fears that people all have to their advantage, and I think that's why it works so well. It takes mundane things and makes them scary in a way. Certainly, I think that's what makes it work so well.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
like even like the Cybermen in themselves, returning to them, they are such a relevant concept because we are constantly upgrading and evolving our technology, and to a point where it's not impossible to imagine becoming Cybermen at some point, which is why I think they're so like they've remained so relevant as well.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's the sort of the universal fear of humans
yeah,
uh,
exactly.
about something that's humanoid. Uh, Certainly, the Cybermen were the ones who frightened me most as a
Mm.
child. My mother stopped me watching the program because I was so scared of Cybermen that I was having nightmares.
Oh wow.
And I think it was very much because they are of humanity. They are of humans, but they're not. There's nothing about humanity in them.
Exactly. Yeah, it's such a wonderful like concept. And I think as well that obviously in your story, Silver Nemesis, they're not the only villain in that one because obviously you've got Lady Painful, who is
Yeah.
after the Nemesis, but also they even have a group that's attempting to resurrect the Fourth Reich, and I think I actually really liked the clashing of ideologies in that story, but also it shows strikingly the similarities between some of them as well, and how it's very easy to fall down those sort of trappings and paths if we're
Yeah.
not in our own way careful of those things. I think that's something I enjoy a lot about this period of the show as well. That what you were on was there's a lot of sort of clashing of ideologies and clashing of ideas, and like obviously Remembrance of the Daleks is probably the most famous example of that because it's literally the entire premise is two Dalek factions fighting each other, but I think also obviously Silver Nemesis is another example of that. And I think even, you know, Battlefield as well, when you've got the sort of medieval type knights fighting up against the modern technology, I think that leads to some striking imagery as well. I really like the juxtaposition between the different sort of factions that are involved in these stories, certainly.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's down to Andrew Cartmell, who was so instrumental in Sylvester's the sort of the portrayal of Sylvester's Doctor,
Yeah.
and working with Sylvester, because that's what was important to them. You know,
Yeah.
the sort of issue based, because where we were politically as a country was you know, it was challenging at the time for
Yeah.
many of us, you know, and it was you know, who would have thought that we could have addressed these sorts of issues in a family show like Doctor Who? But I think that's always been the case, though. Doctor Who had dealt with issues all the way
Oh yeah.
through. It's always been a program about the Doctor Who is a pacifist, Doctor Who is an environmentalist, Doctor Who is for humanity, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, something I really enjoy about your tenure on the show is that it progressively gets darker, and there's a lot that the Doctor keeps hidden away from Ace. And obviously, the original plan was to reveal the Doctor's origins. That never came to pass, but obviously, we got Ghostlight, which reveals some more about Ace's origins. And even there, from what I understand of that story, like that's got a lot of political sort of drive behind it, because Ace did it out of rage because some of her friends were attacked, and she did it out of rage. And I think that's, again, like such a political thing to talk about.
Yes. Oh yeah, completely, absolutely.
And I definitely think it works to the benefit of that story as well. So something I want to ask you about as well. Obviously, we've talked about you meeting the Daleks and the Cybermen, but obviously you met some famous humans from the show's past. That sounds weird to say, but it's apt when you're talking about Doctor Who, I suppose. Obviously, you met Nicholas Courtney, who played the Brigadier, and you met Anthony Ainley, who played the Master in Survival. What were they like as sort of co-stars and people in general?
Oh well, I'd grown up with the Brigadier,
Yeah.
And so to actually meet Nick and to find out what an amazing human being he was, the nicest, loveliest, funnest, gentlest man to be around. We became great friends, and I still miss him so much on the convention circuit to this day. It was a joy to work with him and to, you know, to have that kind of slight rivalry in our affections on screen, but that definitely wasn't there in real life.
No,
I mean,
yeah.
it was just like so lovely to, and he was an absolute fan favorite, as you know, as
Oh,
well.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
No, completely.
And then Anthony was a fascinating guy, because, you know, he loved being in Doctor Who. He loved playing the Master. He didn't have to work at all, but he just loved playing that part. And who can blame him? I mean,
Oh no, absolutely.
he's an amazing Master, I think. And
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, it was great to do stories with the Brigadier and the Masters, as well as the Cybermen and the Daleks. I mean, I'm so fortunate to have done that.
I mean, you got all the best pickings, I think. Like, you know,
I really did. Yeah.
You got what everyone wants to face when they're on Doctor Who.
Absolutely.
Like, I think you know, even if, you know, God forbid I was invited on Doctor Who, I think if I wasn't didn't get to meet either a Dalek or a Cyberman, I'd be a little bit disappointed by that. But you know, I still love to be there. But you know,
yeah, anyone would, wouldn't they?
But yeah, no. It's I wanted to ask you as well. Obviously, once the show was cancelled, a couple of years later, there was a Children in Need special, which was sort of JNT's final contribution to Doctor Who, which was Dimensions in Time. which sort of tied into the Children in Need telethon. What was that one like? Because that is one of the more obscure pieces of the Doctor Who sort of mythos, if you like.
Yes.
So what was that experience like? Because it is very different to your average Doctor Who episode, for sure.
Oh, completely. I mean, it was as all Children in Need skits are. It was an attempt to try and shoehorn as many famous people together as much time as possible, in order to raise the money for the charity. There was nothing to do with this is going to be a Doctor Who story or part of the canon or whatever it was.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It was John having fun and trying to make a difference as he always did, but John loved famous people as well. He loved the sort of razzmatazz. He'd have been a fantastic producer in light entertainment. He'd have loved Strictly, it's such a shame that he never got to do anything like that. But yeah, it was completely his idea for a bit of fun to raise a lot of money. And also, obviously, to use this 3D technology, which we'd never done before. So it was wonderful fun to shoot, to go to Albert Square, to be with all these people I'd seen on telly, to go to Greenwich, which was just around the corner from me, and to just get together again and get the costume on again. It was great.
No, completely. So did you get to meet not only like the EastEnders cast, but the extended Doctor Who cast that was brought out for that?
Yes. Well, I mean, obviously not all of them, but the great thing about conventions and stuff, of course, is that we did and do still get to meet each other there. So I count as among my very close friends now. People like Katie Manning and Nicola Bryant and Louise Jameson and Wendy Pabber. I mean, and then the companions. We feel like it's like a tribe. I mean, I haven't mentioned all of them, and every single one of those women I absolutely love to bits, and we get on really, really well.
Yeah.
And the Doctors as well. To be, to know and love. Colin and Paul and all of them, it is when I first started in Doctor Who, I can't remember who it was, but they said people were saying, "Oh, welcome to the family," and I was thinking, what do you mean? That's a bit yucky. Actually, it is so true. I know that if I was in trouble or anything, if I was to ring up any one of those people in the Doctor Who family, then they would be right there for me.
That's lovely. That's a lovely thing to think about, that it is so close knit, because obviously we always hear whenever a new Doctor or something like that's announced, you get obviously past actors saying, "Oh, welcome aboard," and good luck and all that. So obviously it's nice to hear that is such a true thing, obviously, because it's hard.
All true.
Yeah, because it's so hard to tell sometimes, I think, what's real and what is, obviously, especially in television and in media, what's real and what's scripted,
manufactured.
Yeah, and I think the fact that is so true, I think that's just like wonderful. So like, I'll probably now always think whenever someone new is announced that when doctors or companions say congratulations and stuff, that's genuinely like how they feel about it, and they genuinely...
yeah, it's a completely genuine. We welcome everybody with open arms. It's a fantastic honour to have been in the programme, and a fantastic thing to be passing on to another person, and to grow the family.
Yeah, absolutely. It just seems like such a nice sort of family to be a part of, for lack of a better term.
It's nice you say that, because it's like I'm thinking of everybody now. I suddenly remembered, oh my God, Fraser, and I haven't seen, and it actually has. That's what I have really missed, seeing everybody actually during these strange times we're living in.
Oh, absolutely.
I've missed seeing the family, and I've missed seeing the fan family as well, because don't forget that some of these people we've grown up with. We've grown
Yeah.
up together, so they're part of the family too.
Oh, absolutely. I wanted to ask you, obviously, before we wrap this up. Obviously, I mentioned time earlier, but there's an anecdote that I've heard that when Sylvester did the final lines of the story, basically sending the Rani back, he was actually drunk, so they gave him all the technobabble lines. Was is that a fact? Is that something that was the case?
I don't know. No, I can't possibly verify.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I can completely understand that. I thought I was going to get a little inside scoop there, but you managed to keep it secret for just a little while longer. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute blast.
Oh, I'm so pleased. It's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anywhere would you like me to point people in the direction of, or anything you want me to put in the links in the description? Or
Oh my goodness. Well, they can At Childhood's End, the book, the season 26 Blu-ray, of course.
Yeah.
Big Finish.
Yeah.
Yeah, all those things, which I'm sure you'll put in anyway.
I will. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So you heard Sophie there. You got to make sure you get to all of that. I'll put all the links in the description below. Again, thank you so much for coming on.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you all for watching, and I will see you again soon. All right. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah!